In just 53 seconds, one of Hollywood's most respected actors went from sitting calmly in a studio chair to storming off a daytime talk show in absolute fury. What started as a conversation about representation in Hollywood turned into a fiery explosion of accusations, interruptions, and disrespect that left the audience gasping and cameras shaking. Tamron Hall pushed too far. Samuel L. Jackson pushed back harder. And what happened next became the most talked about moment in daytime television. Before we get into this explosive story, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the confrontations they don't want you to see, and the truth behind the cameras. Hit that subscribe button now because you won't want to miss what we uncover next. Last night, Tamron Hall's show was supposed to be another day of celebrity interviews and heartwarming stories. Instead, it became a battlefield. Samuel L. Jackson, the legendary actor known for speaking his mind and taking no nonsense from anyone, was invited to discuss his latest project and his decades-long career in Hollywood. What the producers didn't expect was that their host would turn what should have been a respectful conversation into an interrogation that would blow up in her face. The trouble started almost immediately after Samuel sat down. Tamron opened with what seemed like a standard question about his career, but there was an edge to her tone that caught Samuel's attention right away. She leaned forward in her chair, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, and asked him about the controversy surrounding his recent comments about diversity in Hollywood casting. Samuel looked at her with that signature intensity in his eyes and calmly explained that there was no controversy, just facts. He had simply stated that Hollywood still had a long way to go when it came to authentic representation, and that too many roles meant for black actors were being given to actors from other countries, while talented African American actors struggled to find work. But Tamron wasn't having it. She interrupted him mid-sentence, something you just don't do to Samuel L. Jackson, and suggested that his comments were being seen as divisive within the black community itself. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Samuel's jaw tightened, but he remained composed, asking her to let him finish his thought. Tamron apologized quickly, but it felt hollow, like she was just checking a box before moving on to her next attack. She then brought up quotes from other actors who disagreed with his stance, reading them off her cards with a tone that made it clear whose side she was on. Samuel listened, his expression growing darker with each word. When she finally stopped talking, Samuel took a deep breath and said something that made the entire studio go silent. He told her that she was doing exactly what the industry had been doing for years, pitting black voices against each other instead of focusing on the real issue, which was systemic inequality in Hollywood. His voice was steady, but there was fire behind every word. Tamron's face flushed red. She clearly wasn't expecting him to call her out so directly on her own show. She tried to laugh it off, telling him that she was just asking questions that her viewers wanted answered. But Samuel wasn't laughing. He asked her point blank why she felt the need to bring other people's opinions into this, instead of just having a conversation with him about his perspective. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Audience members glanced at each other nervously. The camera operators kept rolling, but you could see them exchanging looks. This was not going according to plan. Tamron, instead of backing down or steering the conversation in a different direction, decided to double down. She brought up an old interview where Samuel had used strong language about the industry, suggesting that maybe his approach was part of the problem. She said that perhaps if he was more diplomatic, more people would listen to his message. That was the spark that lit the fuse. Samuel's eyes went wide for a moment, like he couldn't believe what he just heard. Then he leaned back in his chair and asked her if she really just tried to tone police him on national television. The way he said it made everyone in that studio understand that something major was about to happen. Tamron tried to explain that she wasn't tone policing anyone, that she was just suggesting that there are different ways to communicate the same message. But Samuel cut her off this time, and his voice rose just enough to show that his patience was running out. He told her that he had been in this industry for over 4 decades, that he had fought for every single role, every bit of respect, every ounce of recognition he had earned. He said he didn't need a talk show host who had been in the game a fraction of that time telling him how to communicate his truth. The audience actually gasped out loud at that one. Tamron's professional mask started to crack. She set her cards down on her desk a little too hard, making a loud slapping sound that echoed through the studio. She told Samuel that she was just trying to have an honest conversation, and that if he couldn't handle being asked tough questions, maybe he shouldn't have agreed to come on the show. Wrong move. Completely wrong move. Samuel sat up straight in his chair, his full presence suddenly filling the entire studio. He told her that there was a difference between tough questions and disrespectful interrogation. He said that she had invited him on her show under the pretense of discussing his work, only to ambush him with a debate she had clearly already made up her mind about. Tamron tried to interrupt him, but Samuel raised his hand and kept talking. He said that he had noticed a pattern on her show where she seemed to enjoy putting successful black men in uncomfortable positions, making them defend themselves and their accomplishments rather than celebrating them. The camera caught Tamron's face at that moment, and you could see the anger flashing in her eyes. She shot back that she treated all her guests the same way, asking everyone tough questions regardless of who they were. Samuel actually laughed at that, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. He asked her when was the last time she interrogated a white actor about being too vocal or too aggressive in their opinions. The silence that followed was deafening. Tamron's voice got louder. She insisted that she wasn't treating him any differently than anyone else, and that if he felt attacked, maybe he needed to examine why he was so defensive. The audience couldn't believe what they were hearing. Even some of Tamron's own crew members looked shocked. Samuel's response was calm but absolutely devastating. He told her that he wasn't defensive. He was disappointed. He said he had expected better from her, that he had hoped she would use her platform to elevate important conversations rather than create drama for ratings. He said the fact that she couldn't see the difference between holding power accountable and attacking someone for speaking truth was exactly why these conversations were so necessary. That's when things really went off the rails. Tamron stood up from her chair, something hosts rarely do during interviews unless they're ending the segment. But she wasn't ending it. She was escalating it. She told Samuel that she didn't appreciate him coming on her show and insulting her journalistic integrity. She said that she had every right to question his statements and his approach, and that if he didn't like it, he knew where the door was. The studio went completely silent. Even the audience members who had been whispering to each other stopped. Everyone was staring at Tamron, unable to believe she had just said that to Samuel L. Jackson on live television. Samuel looked at her for a long moment, and you could see him making a decision in real time. He slowly stood up from his chair, his movements deliberate and controlled. He unclipped his microphone with steady hands while maintaining eye contact with Tamron the entire time. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire studio. He told her that she had just proven every single point he had been trying to make. He said that instead of listening, instead of engaging in good faith, instead of using this moment to have a real conversation, she had chosen to be combative, dismissive, and disrespectful. Tamron tried to interrupt, tried to say something about him being unprofessional, but Samuel wasn't done. He said that he had sat through thousands of interviews in his career, some tough, some challenging, some where he was genuinely held accountable for things he said or did. But this, he said, pointing at her and then at the cameras, this was not journalism. This was not even entertainment. This was just ugly. He placed his microphone on the chair he had been sitting in and told Tamron that she should think long and hard about what kind of conversations she wanted to have on her show. He said that if her goal was to tear down people who looked like her and him, she was doing a great job. But if her goal was to actually make a difference or shed light on important issues, she was failing miserably. Tamron's face was bright red now, and she was clearly furious. She raised her voice and told Samuel that he was being dramatic, that he was making this into something it didn't need to be. She said that maybe the reason he was so upset was because he couldn't handle being questioned by a black woman. The audience collectively gasped again. Several people in the crowd shook their heads in disbelief. Even Tamron seemed to realize immediately that she had crossed a line, but it was too late. The words were out there. Samuel stopped walking. He had been heading toward the exit, but he turned around slowly. His expression was one of complete disbelief mixed with disappointment. He told her that she should be ashamed of herself for even suggesting that. He said that he had spent his entire career supporting black women, working with black women, uplifting black women in the industry. He said that trying to use race and gender as a shield for her own poor behavior was not just wrong, it was disgusting. He said that being a black woman didn't give her a free pass to be disrespectful. Just like being a black man didn't mean he had to sit there and take it. He told her that she was hiding behind identity politics to avoid taking responsibility for how she had conducted this interview from the very beginning. Tamron was visibly shaking now, whether from anger or something else, it was hard to tell. She pointed at Samuel and told him to get off her set. She actually yelled it, "Get off my set!" The audience was in complete shock. Samuel looked at her one more time and said something that everyone in that studio would remember forever. He said that he didn't need to be told twice, that he had been in this business long enough to know when he wasn't wanted and when he wasn't respected. But he wanted to make one thing perfectly clear to her and to everyone watching. He said that young actors, especially young black actors, were watching people like her. They were looking for examples of how to navigate this industry with dignity and purpose. And what she had shown them today was how not to do it. He said she had chosen confrontation over conversation, ego over understanding, and ratings over respect. Then he looked directly into the main camera, not at Tamron, and spoke to the audience at home. He told them that they deserved better than this kind of television. He said that real conversations about race and representation and art were important and necessary, but they had to come from a place of genuine curiosity and respect, not from a place of trying to create viral moments. Tamron was screaming now, telling her security to escort him out, telling her producers to cut to commercial. But Samuel was already walking away, his head held high, his dignity completely intact, despite everything that had just happened. As he walked past the audience, several people started clapping. It started with just a few people, but within seconds, more than half the audience was applauding him. Some were even standing up. Tamron noticed this, and it made her even angrier. She told the audience to stop, that this was her show, and they needed to respect her authority. But the applause continued. Samuel reached the exit door and pushed it open. Just before he walked through, he turned back one last time. He didn't say anything, just gave a small shake of his head like he was disappointed in how everything had unfolded. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud that echoed through the now chaotic studio. Tamron was left standing at her desk, breathing heavily, her carefully constructed show falling apart around her. The audience was buzzing with conversation, some people still clapping, others arguing with each other about what they had just witnessed. The camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. The producers were frantically talking into their headsets, trying to figure out what to do next. Tamron finally signaled to cut to commercial, her hand slicing through the air in a gesture that looked almost violent. As soon as the cameras cut, you could hear her voice carrying through the studio, demanding to know why nobody had warned her that Samuel was going to be difficult, why nobody had prepared her better, why her team had failed her. But her team hadn't failed her. She had failed herself. She had invited a legend onto her show, and instead of honoring that, instead of creating a meaningful dialogue, she had picked a fight she couldn't win with someone who had been battling much bigger opponents than her for his entire career. The audience members were escorted out during the commercial break, many of them still talking excitedly about what they had just seen. Some were recording voice memos on their phones, calling their friends, texting frantically. They all knew they had just witnessed something that would be talked about for a long time. When the show came back from commercial, Tamron was alone at her desk. She tried to compose herself, tried to do a segment about something completely unrelated, like nothing had happened. But her energy was off, her smile was forced, and everyone watching at home could tell that something major had gone down. Social media had already exploded. Clips of the confrontation were being shared thousands of times per minute. The hashtags were trending worldwide. And the overwhelming majority of people were on Samuel's side, calling out Tamron for her aggressive approach, her interruptions, her disrespect, and especially for that final comment about him not being able to handle being questioned by a black woman. Back in the studio, as Tamron tried to push through the rest of her show, you could see it in her eyes that she knew she had messed up badly. But it was too late. The damage was done. Samuel L. Jackson had walked off her set, and he had taken a massive piece of her credibility with him. The confrontation had lasted less than 20 minutes from start to finish, but it felt like hours. Every moment had been filled with tension, with barely contained anger, with words that couldn't be taken back. Two successful black figures in entertainment had clashed on live television, and only one of them had walked away with their dignity intact. Tamron had tried to corner a lion and got mauled in the process. She had underestimated who she was dealing with, had overestimated her own authority, and had failed to recognize that respect is earned, not demanded. Samuel L. Jackson had spent 40 years earning his stripes in Hollywood, fighting battles that Tamron couldn't even imagine, and facing down challenges that would have broken lesser people. He didn't need her show, he didn't need her platform, and he certainly didn't need her respect. But she had needed his, and she had thrown it away with both hands in pursuit of a dramatic moment that backfired spectacularly. As the show finally ended and Tamron said her closing remarks, her voice was flat, her energy depleted. The studio audience that had been brought in to replace the earlier crowd during commercial break applauded politely, but without enthusiasm. Everyone could feel that something was off, that something had gone terribly wrong even if they hadn't seen it themselves. Backstage, Samuel L. Jackson was long gone. He had left the building immediately, not stopping to talk to anyone, not interested in rehashing what had just happened or giving anyone else a chance to twist his words. He had said what he needed to say. He had stood up for himself when disrespected, and he had walked away on his own terms. That's what legends do. They don't beg for respect, they don't argue for basic human decency, and they definitely don't stick around when it's clear that respect and decency aren't being offered. They simply walk away, leaving those who wronged them to deal with the consequences. And the consequences for Tamron Hall were immediate and severe. Within hours, her show was being dragged across every social media platform. Think pieces were being written about her interviewing style, her treatment of guests, her apparent need to create conflict rather than conversation. People were going back through her archives, finding other moments where she had been unnecessarily aggressive or dismissive with guests. But none of that mattered to Samuel L. Jackson. He had moved on the moment he walked out that door. He had given that show and that host exactly as much time and energy as they deserved, which turned out to be about 20 minutes. No more, no less. The door had closed behind him with that heavy thud, and with it, any possibility of redemption for how that interview had been conducted. Tamron Hall had wanted a memorable interview with the Hollywood legend, and she got one, just not in the way she had hoped. Instead of being remembered for extracting some fascinating insight or having a breakthrough conversation, she would be remembered as the host who disrespected Samuel L. Jackson so badly that he walked off her show in disgust, taking half her audience's respect with him.